This year, I've been trying to shoot with more intention, slowing down, composing with purpose, paying attention to light in ways I used to ignore. And somewhere in that process, I started reaching for a lens that wasn't always my first choice. A lens I used to think was too tight, too boring, but now it's quietly becoming one of my favorites. Today we're talking about the Fujifilm XF 35mm f2 and why it might be more powerful than you think. Let me start by saying that this isn't a new lens for me. I've had this lens for years and I originally picked it up for its size and weight, but mainly because so many photographers I admired were using it at the time. But to be honest, when I first tried it, it didn't excite me. I was coming off the Fujifilm 23mm f2, and compared to that, the 35 felt too tight, too limiting, and just not as enjoyable to use at the time. And so it mostly stayed in my bag. And it wasn't until I shifted how I shoot that I started to actually understand what this lens is all about, but a little bit more on that later. So let's start by talking about image quality, because I know that's probably what's brought most of you here today. As you'd expect from Fujifilm, it's an incredibly sharp lens. In the center, really clean, and at f5.6, even the edges hold up nicely. And while I don't often shoot wide open, the performance at f2 is solid, and the depth you get is just enough for portraits and those detail shots. It's not going to be like the bokeh you see at f1.2 or f1.4, but personally, f2 is plenty for me and what I reckon is good enough for most people. But for me, the biggest surprise has been how this lens handles color and contrast. While most of the heavy lifting is done by the Fujifilm sensor, the colors that I'm getting out of this lens are incredible, and I'm not really experiencing many lens flares when I'm not using the hood. And so from a technical image quality standpoint, this lens really holds up. Now let's talk about the shift that kind of changed everything for me with this lens. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the shift to pick up the 35mm came actually after changing the way I shoot. See, the 35mm on an APS-C sensor like the XE4 is going to give you a 50mm full frame equivalent look. And 50mm is a funny focal length in my opinion. It's not wide, it's not telly, it just sits there right in the middle. And that actually demands quite a lot more out of you as a photographer. You can't rely on just capturing a wide looking frame or compression to make a shot look interesting. You actually have to see something when you're capturing it. And making this shift really made me slow down when I was actually out shooting. If you've seen any of my other videos, you would know I like to walk around and snap as I go, but shifting this approach and slowing down a bit has really lent itself well to this lens. And so by slowing down, I really started to feel why this 35mm was so powerful. I began experimenting with Fujifilm's photometry modes, mainly spot metering, so instead of letting the camera expose for the whole scene, I'd meter for a small section of light and build the photo around that. And now living in Barcelona, we get a lot of harsh shadows throughout the day in the old parts of town. These sharp lines, strong contrasts are big things I avoided when I was just actually out snapping photos. I never found the time to enjoy them or really compose images in them. And so with spot metering and the tighter 35mm frame, I started to notice scenes I would have just walked past before. People walking through patches of light, faces in hallways, everything was starting to look a little bit more cinematic without me trying to. And so it wasn't the lens that changed, it was actually how I was using. And funny enough, that's also what led me back to Skillshare. I've used Skillshare before, and I think a lot of us have over the years, but recently I found myself going through their learning paths and learning more about storytelling, content structure, and a bunch of other things. They've got thousands of classes from photography, video, freelancing, all the way through to design and branding, even now some AI stuff taught by people who actually work in the industry. The learning paths are great in my opinion because they're curated and they give you a beginning to end structure of a new skill you might be wanting to learn. And so instead of bouncing all around looking for different videos, you have them all in one place, guaranteed to give you a transformation. It's already helped me think differently about how I shoot, how I produce YouTube content, and right now I'm enjoying a class called Using AI and ChatGPT for Content Creation, which has been eye-opening. And so if you're looking for new ways to share your photography, improve skills, your freelancing, even your business, it is certainly worth checking out. And that's why I'm super happy to say that the first 500 people that click the link below or scan the QR code here on the screen get a free month of Skillshare when you sign up. Signing up for 1 month will give you access to all of the classes, and then from there you can make the decision to carry on. I'm signed up right now, and I always enjoy going in and checking out what's been updated and different ways I can improve. And so make sure you hit the link, get signed up, and enjoy that 1 month free. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Okay, so back to the lens. One of the things that really stood out to me, like I mentioned at the start, was its size and portability. This is probably one of the biggest reasons as to why I stuck with this lens even when I wasn't using it so much, because it is so small and light. It is so simple to bring around with you. It's one of those lenses that makes your camera feel invisible, and using it on the XE4, the the balance and the size of it looks perfect for when you're walking around taking everyday street photos. If you are someone that has a bigger Fujifilm like an X-H2 or an X-H2S, you will see that this still fits really nicely on the camera. And as well, if you have a smaller Fujifilm camera like the X-E4, the X-T32, or even the X-M5, this lens is going to sit perfectly on it. Now, it's important for me to say that this lens isn't water sealed, so I wouldn't recommend using it out when you're shooting in the rain if that's something you're into. However, it is weather resistant, so you can expect not a lot of dust and sand will get stuck in it, but I really would avoid it. These lenses aren't designed to be rugged and out there. Personally, I have pushed the limits with this lens and this camera system. However, I would recommend taking a little bit of care if you were to pick this lens up. And lastly, when it comes to the build quality, I have been really impressed with how this lens feels in the hand, especially when you are changing the aperture on the aperture ring. It's a really well built and thoughtful piece of kit. Next, I want to briefly touch on the autofocus. Personally, as an autofocus shooter, I don't often use this lens for manual focus, and so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but this lens rarely hunts, and every time I've been really impressed with how it actually focuses on the go. Using continuous autofocus and zone focusing I've found to be the best combination with a lens like this. I use the joystick on my X-E4 to move the zone around, and within that, the continuous autofocus has done a great job, especially at capturing moving subjects. And now it's likely you might be wanting to use this lens for video, but I will stress to you that this isn't a fantastic lens for shooting video. Now, I think it would be fine if you had a Fujifilm with IBIS, so in-body image stabilization, something like the XS20 or the X-H2S. However, with me and the X-E4, this just isn't a reality. And so the fact that this lens doesn't have any inbuilt stabilization means that all of the video you capture using this is going to be quite shaky. Along with that, the lens is quite small, so finding ND filters for a thread size this big might be a little bit out of touch with the rest of your kit. And so this definitely isn't a video focus lens. You can obviously use it, and I would definitely recommend trying it. I've done it a few times, but a lot of the footage that comes out of it is very shaky. Personally, if I ever want to shoot video on my Fujifilm, I would use the kit lens, which is stabilized, but as I'm a Sony shooter as well, and now with the DJI Osmo, I would shoot all of my video on those because it's balanced, stabilized, and I don't really need to worry about it. So lastly, now I want to talk about where this lens fits in my kit and how it can fit in yours moving forward. As of right now, the 35mm sits on my camera for, let's say, 60 to 70% of the time. The remaining would be on my 23mm f2, and for viewers of the channel and that have followed me for a while, you'll notice that this is quite the 180 compared to my last review of the 23mm. Personally, I think it's because I'm really enjoying the fact that I have to slow down and shoot with a lot more intention, and I'm becoming a better photographer as a result of that. The 23mm is a fantastic option and still something I would recommend for everyday shooting and someone that's just going on a big trip. But personally, now that I live in a beautiful location, I would love to get better at the actual art of photography and composing my images, so the 35mm really encourages this. And also the fact that the 23mm is starting to look similar to a lot of iPhone and blogger style focal lengths, having the 35mm, so that punched in 50 look, is just setting my work apart a little bit more. And this is something I spoke about in my newsletter a few weeks ago about upgrading equipment, but right now I am really happy with the 35 and 23mm f2 lenses for Fujifilm. As the year goes on, I am really excited to see what Fujifilm announces in terms of camera bodies and potential new zoom lenses. And so if you are on the fence about picking up this 35mm f2, I would certainly recommend you look at how you actually go about shooting. If you are someone who enjoys run and gun quick snaps, I wouldn't suggest this 35mm for you. This lens is going to require a lot more intention, a slower pace of shooting. But if you do make this shift like I have started to, you will notice a significant improvement in the quality of images you create. If you let it, this lens will teach you a lot and certainly improve you as a photographer. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and if you're stuck between choosing the 23mm or the 35mm, check out the review video I did of that and that'll help you decide.